Welcome to Miss Scarlett. Subscribe and don't miss out on Patreon. Have fun! Amongst the towering steel and glass of Abernathy Industries headquarters, Lionel Davis felt a surge of nervous energy. He stood in the atrium, a mere speck in this vast corporate empire. The decor mirrored the ambition of its employees, cold and unforgiving, a reflection of the reality that awaited inside. Freshening up, Lionel meticulously adjusted his attire. His fingers fidgeted with the elegant burgundy tie as he straightened it against his pristine white shirt before brushing non-existent creases from his refined gray suit. The outfit, usually a source of confidence, felt uncomfortably restrictive. Anticipation had its hold on him, as did the looming quarterly performance review with the legendary Mr. Trying to Impress the Big Man. Maxwell from accounting leaned against the elevator wall, grinning.
"Just maintaining standards,"
Lionel replied, running a hand through his short blonde hair.
"You know how Abernathy is about presentation."
The elevator climbed steadily, each floor bringing Lionel closer to the executive suite where Richard Abernathy, CEO and corporate legend, ruled with measured words and cutting insights. Stories circulated about employees who entered his office confident and left questioning their career choices.
"Well, good luck up there. Word is he's been especially demanding lately."
Maxwell exited on the 15th floor with a mock salute. Alone in the elevator, Lionel practiced his presentation points mentally. 6 months at Abernathy Industries had taught him that preparation was everything. His projections for the Eastern markets were solid. The data supported his recommendations. There was nothing to worry about. Yet anxiety crawled through him like an electrical current. Something about Richard Abernathy had always unnerved Lionel. Beyond the natural intimidation of speaking to a CEO worth hundreds of millions. It was something in the man's eyes, a distance, as though part of him existed elsewhere. The elevator doors opened to the executive floor. Abernathy's assistant, Ms. Porter, looked up from her computer with a practiced smile. "Mr. Davis, he's running 15 minutes behind. Market call with Tokyo." She gestured to the waiting area. "Coffee? No, thank you." Lionel took a seat, clutching his leather portfolio. The wait would only prolong the anticipation. 20 minutes later, Ms. Porter's phone buzzed. "Mr. Abernathy will see you now." Lionel entered the corner office where floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the city. Richard Abernathy stood with his back to the door, phone pressed to his ear, his tall frame silhouetted against the afternoon sun. His silver-streaked dark hair was impeccably styled, his charcoal suit custom-tailored to his broad shoulders. "We'll continue this discussion tomorrow. Goodbye." He ended the call and turned, fixing Lionel with eyes the color of winter steel. "Davis, your quarterly report. Let's make this efficient." "Yes, sir." Lionel moved to the conference table, spreading his materials. For 40 minutes, he walked through market projections, competitor analyses, and strategy recommendations. Abernathy asked precise, penetrating questions. He missed nothing, challenged everything. By the end, Lionel's shirt clung to his back with nervous sweat. "Adequate work," Abernathy finally said, which from him was substantial praise. "I'm sending you to the Boston conference next week. The Eastern market expansion needs a face, and Henderson is falling short. You'll take his place." Thank you, sir. I appreciate the opportunity." Abernathy nodded curtly. "Porter has the details. That will be all." Walking out of the office felt like emerging from deep water. Lionel collected the conference information from Ms. Porter and headed back to his office, mind racing with this unexpected development. The Boston conference was a significant opportunity, visibility with major clients, networking with industry leaders. That evening, Lionel stayed late, researching everything about the conference. The main events were at the Ritz-Carlton, but several private industry gatherings would happen throughout Boston. One caught his eye, an exclusive reception at a private club called the Golden Crane, invitation only. Curious, he searched for information about the venue. The results were sparse, an upscale establishment catering to discerning clientele seeking privacy and sophistication. He made a note to ask Henderson about it tomorrow. The week passed in a blur of preparation. Henderson, bitter about being replaced, provided minimal guidance. The Golden Crane reception is where the real deals happen, he grudgingly admitted.
Very exclusive, very discreet. You've got the invitation in your packets. Don't embarrass the company.
Boston greeted Lionel with unexpected warmth for late September. The conference itself went well. He delivered his presentation confidently, engaged with potential clients, and made promising connections. By Friday evening, he felt a growing sense of accomplishment. The Golden Crane reception was scheduled for 9 p.m. Following the address from his invitation, Lionel found himself in front of an unmarked door in the Back Bay area. Only a small golden bird emblem indicated he was in the right place. He presented his invitation to a stern-faced doorman who assessed him carefully before stepping aside. Inside, the Golden Crane was a study in tasteful opulence. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light over dark wood and velvet furnishings. The clientele was diverse, but uniformly well-dressed and composed. Soft jazz played from an unseen source. Lionel accepted a glass of champagne from a passing server and began to circulate. He recognized several industry figures and managed some productive conversations. Around 11 p.m., seeking a moment's reprieve from networking, he wandered down a hallway, looking for a restroom. Taking a wrong turn, he found himself near what appeared to be private lounges. That's when he heard it. A familiar voice, authoritative, precise, unmistakable. Richard Abernathy. But something was different about the tone, lighter, more melodious than Lionel had ever heard in the office. Confused, he moved toward the partially open door where the voice originated. The sight that greeted him froze his breath in his lungs. Richard Abernathy sat at a vanity, leaning toward a mirror, applying lipstick with practiced precision. But it wasn't the Richard Abernathy that Lionel knew from corporate headquarters. This Abernathy wore a stunning gold sequined cocktail dress that caught the light with every movement. Long, elegant legs crossed at the knee, ending in gold stiletto heels. A styled blonde wig framed her face perfectly. Lionel stood transfixed, unable to process what he was seeing. His hand slipped against the door, pushing it further open. In the mirror, Abernathy's eyes met his. Recognition flashed, followed by something Lionel had never seen on the CEO's face. Vulnerability, quickly masked by fury. "Davis!" The voice was back to its corporate register. "What are you doing back here?" I was looking for the restroom, sir. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to."
Get out. Now!
The words came like ice shards. Lionel retreated, heart hammering. He mumbled another apology and fled, not stopping until he reached the main reception area. He grabbed another champagne and drained it, trying to calm his racing thoughts. Richard Abernathy, the stern, demanding CEO, the corporate titan, in a gold, sequined dress. Lionel made his excuses and left the reception early. Back in his hotel room, he paced, replaying the moment. What had he stumbled upon? A secret life? Was this why Abernathy always seemed so distant, so controlled? Sleep evaded him that night. By morning, he had made a decision. Whatever he had seen was personal. It wasn't his business. He would pretend it never happened. The conference concluded the next day. Lionel avoided the remaining events where Abernathy might appear and took an earlier flight back to New York. Monday morning arrived with dread. Lionel arrived at the office early, half expecting a termination notice. Instead, his inbox contained a meeting request from Abernathy for 4 p.m. No subject line, no details. The day crawled by. Lionel could barely focus on his work. By 3:45, his nerves had frayed to breaking point.
Davis, come in.
Abernathy's voice was its usual controlled baritone when Lionel entered the office. The CEO sat behind his desk, impeccable in a navy suit. No trace of the person Lionel had glimpsed in Boston. Lionel stood uncomfortably, waiting.
Sit down.
Abernathy gestured to a chair.
You're probably wondering about Friday night.
Sir, I want to assure you that
I'm not interested in your assurances, Davis.
Abernathy cut him off.
I'm interested in your discretion. What you saw was private.
Of course, sir. I haven't mentioned it to anyone. Abernathy studied him for a long moment.
You're surprised? Confused?
It's not my place to—
No, it isn't.
Abernathy stood abruptly, moving to the window.
But since circumstances have forced this conversation, I'll be direct. What you saw is part of who I am. It has been for decades. It remains separate from this company for obvious reasons.
Lionel nodded, unsure what response was expected.
The business world has certain expectations, Abernathy continued. Appearances matter. Perception shapes reality. I understand, sir.
Do you? Abernathy turned, fixing him with that penetrating gaze.
I wonder. Tell me, Davis, have you ever felt like you're living someone else's life? Like the person everyone sees isn't really you?
The question caught Lionel off guard. Memories surfaced. Childhood moments of trying on his mother's shoes when no one was home, the secret thrill of nail polish hastily removed before anyone could see, the persistent feeling that something about his reflection had never seemed quite right.
I may have had moments,
he admitted carefully. Something shifted in Abernathy's expression, not quite softening, but a recognition.
Then perhaps you understand more than most would.
He returned to his desk.
Your work at the conference was commendable. The Eastman account was impressed. You'll be taking a more prominent role in their portfolio moving forward.
Thank you, sir.
That will be all, Davis. I trust this conversation remains between us. Absolutely, sir.
Lionel left the office with his job intact, but his mind in turmoil. The brief conversation had stirred something long dormant. That night, alone in his apartment, he found himself opening a locked drawer he rarely accessed. Inside was a small collection of items: a silky scarf, a tube of lipstick, a pair of earrings. Small tokens of a self he had never allowed to fully exist. In the weeks that followed, Lionel threw himself into work. The Eastman account flourished under his guidance. He had minimal contact with Abernathy, just the occasional status meeting where the CEO was his usual demanding self. Then came the company-wide email that changed everything. Effective immediately, Richard Abernathy will be taking a 3-month sabbatical for personal reasons. Calvin Mercer will serve as interim CEO. Normal operations will continue. Speculation ran wild throughout the office. Health issues? Hostile takeover preparation? Secret merger negotiations? Lionel kept his head down, wondering if what he had witnessed was connected. 2 months passed. Lionel's star continued to rise at the company. The Eastman account led to other major clients. He was being mentioned for a promotion to senior executive level, and in private moments, he began experimenting more, growing his blonde hair out slightly, practicing a softer way of speaking, researching online communities that discussed gender identity. Then came the second company-wide announcement that stunned everyone except Lionel. Please join us in welcoming back our CEO, now to be known as Ms. Abigail Abernathy. Ms. Abernathy has undergone gender transition during her sabbatical and will be resuming full leadership duties next Monday. The company fully supports Ms. Abernathy in her authentic identity and remains committed to diversity and inclusion at all levels. Attached was a professional photograph of Abigail Abernathy, elegant, composed, with styled blonde hair and the same penetrating eyes, but now in a tailored women's business suit. The transformation was remarkable, not because she looked like a different person, but because she somehow looked more right, more authentic than Richard ever had. Abigail's return to the office was managed with corporate precision. The executive floor had been remodeled. Sensitivity training had been conducted. By the time she arrived, the initial shock had given way to curious acceptance. Lionel watched from a distance as Abigail navigated her return with the same commanding presence she had always possessed. There were adjustments, a slightly softer management style, more open communication, but the business acumen and strategic vision remained undiminished. 2 weeks after her return, Lionel received another meeting request. Abigail's office had been transformed, much like its occupant. Warmer lighting, different art, but the same impressive view. She rose from behind her desk as Lionel entered, extending her hand. Her handshake was firm as ever. "Davis, thank you for coming. Please, sit." Her voice had changed, trained to a higher register, but with the same precise diction. She wore a cream-colored blouse with a charcoal skirt suit, her blonde hair styled in a sophisticated bob. "I've been following your work with the Eastman portfolio," she began. "Very impressive results this quarter." "Thank you, Ms. Abernathy." A slight smile touched her lips at the name. Still feels new, hearing that. But right. Very right. She assessed him with those familiar, penetrating eyes. "You don't seem surprised by my transformation." I had context that others didn't. "Yes. Our conversation after Boston." She nodded. "That's partly why I called you here. I owe you thanks for your discretion during that vulnerable period." "Of course. The other reason is that I've been observing certain changes in you, Lionel. Subtle, but noticeable to someone with my particular perspective." Lionel tensed, his slightly longer hair, the clear polish on his nails, the voice modulation he'd been practicing.
"I'm not sure what you mean,"
he managed. "I think you do." Her tone was gentle but direct.
"When I asked if you'd ever felt like you were living someone else's life, your answer was revealing."
"And since then, I've noticed signs of someone perhaps beginning their own journey of self-discovery." The room seemed to contract around Lionel. Fear mingled with an unexpected relief at being seen.
"I'm exploring some things,"
he admitted. Abigail nodded. "This company prides itself on recognizing talent and potential. You have both in abundance. I would hate to see that potential constrained because you feel you can't be authentic here." "Are you suggesting?" "I'm suggesting nothing," she interrupted. I'm stating explicitly that your career trajectory at Abernathy Industries will be determined by your performance, not your gender identity. Whatever decisions you make in your personal journey will be supported professionally. Tears pricked at Lionel's eyes. He blinked them back.
I appreciate that, Miss Abernathy.
Good. She returned to business. Now, I'm promoting you to Senior Executive for Client Relations. You'll be overseeing the entire Eastern portfolio. Calvin will brief you on the details tomorrow. Thank you for the opportunity. You've earned it. She smiled again, more fully this time. That will be all, Davis. The promotion accelerated everything, professionally and personally. With greater authority came greater confidence, and with Abigail's implicit support, Lionel began transitioning more openly. It started small, growing his blonde hair longer, softening his wardrobe, using more neutral skincare products. Colleagues noticed, but followed Abigail's lead in focusing on his work performance rather than appearance changes. 3 months after his promotion, Lionel began hormone therapy. 6 months in, he legally changed his name to Whitney Davis. The company updated records seamlessly. Clients adjusted with minimal disruption. Whitney's division continued to outperform expectations. The physical changes came gradually. Softer skin, subtle reshaping of facial features, body fat redistribution. Whitney's natural blonde hair grew past her shoulders, requiring new styling choices for the corporate environment. Her wardrobe evolved from androgynous to definitively feminine, though always professional and understated. Occasional glances with Abigail in executive meetings carried unspoken understanding. They rarely discussed personal matters directly, maintaining appropriate professional boundaries, but the mentorship was evident to anyone paying attention. A year after Whitney's promotion came the announcement of the company's annual gala, a black tie affair celebrating record profits, and the launch of a new corporate headquarters. Whitney stood in her apartment, studying her reflection in the full-length mirror. The black sequined dress caught the light with every breath, creating constellations against the fabric. Her blonde hair was styled in loose waves over one shoulder. Pearl earrings and tasteful makeup completed the transformation. For the first time, the person in the mirror matched the person she had always felt herself to be. The gala was held at the Metropolitan Museum, with the company sparing no expense. Whitney arrived fashionably late, her entrance causing a subtle ripple of appreciation. Former colleagues who hadn't seen her since her transition did double takes, then offered genuine compliments.
Whitney, you look absolutely stunning.
Calvin Mercer approached with champagne flutes.
The Taipei contract came through, by the way.
Your team's presentation was evidently the deciding factor. Thank you, Calvin. That's wonderful news. She accepted the champagne, scanning the room. Is Ms. Abernathy here yet?
Just arrived. She's by the East Gallery, speaking with the board members.
Whitney made her rounds, networking effortlessly. Her confidence had blossomed along with her authentic self, making her even more effective in her role. Clients and colleagues responded to her genuine presence. It was nearly an hour before she encountered Abigail, who was holding court with several industry leaders. The CEO wore an elegant emerald gown that complemented her coloring perfectly. Her blonde hair was swept up in a sophisticated style that emphasized her strong jawline and elegant neck. Their eyes met across the conversation circle. Abigail excused herself and approached Whitney. Ms. Davis, you look exceptional this evening.
As do you, Ms. Abernathy.
They stood side by side, observing the gathering. 2 women in leadership, respected for their business acumen. 2 individuals who had found the courage to align their external selves with their internal truth. I sometimes wonder, Abigail said quietly, what would have happened if you hadn't taken that wrong turn at the Golden Crane? Whitney considered this. I think we both would have arrived here eventually, perhaps just by a longer route. Wisdom beyond your years, Whitney. Abigail smiled. The Wellington acquisition team is waiting to speak with you.
They're particularly impressed with your market penetration strategy.
Duty calls. Whitney nodded. Before moving away, she added, Thank you, Abigail. Not just for the promotion, but for showing me what was possible. We show each other what's possible every day. That's leadership. Abigail raised her glass slightly. To authenticity. To authenticity, Whitney echoed, her black sequined dress catching the light as she turned toward her future. A future where her professional success and personal truth existed in perfect harmony. As the evening progressed, Whitney found herself on the terrace overlooking the city lights. The cool evening air was refreshing after the crowded interior. Quite a view, isn't it? A deep voice spoke beside her. It belonged to Marcus Wellington, CEO of the company they were courting for acquisition. It never gets old, Whitney agreed. New York has a certain magic at night. Much like the transformation of Abernathy Industries under its new leadership. He studied her thoughtfully. You're part of that change, I understand. Calvin speaks highly of your strategic vision. That's kind of him. We're evolving as a company, embracing authentic leadership at every level.
Authenticity. Wellington nodded. An undervalued quality in business. I've been watching your company's performance since Abigail took the helm. The market was skeptical initially.
The market is often resistant to change, Whitney interjected smoothly. Indeed, but the results speak for themselves. 28% growth is persuasive in any language. He sipped his drink. Your presentation tomorrow, will it address the cultural integration concerns our board raised? Whitney turned to face him fully, the sequins of her black dress shifting like a starry night.
It will.
In fact, I've developed a 3-phase approach that maintains your company's distinct strengths while leveraging our expanded market access. They discussed business specifics for 20 minutes. Whitney was in her element, articulating complex strategies with clarity and confidence. Her authentic self enabled a presence that her former self had only approximated. Wellington was completely engaged, Abigail observed later, joining Whitney at a quiet corner table. That acquisition is critical to our 5-year plan. He has concerns about preserving their corporate culture, but they're surmountable. Whitney smoothed her dress. Their technical innovations, paired with our distribution network, make perfect sense.
Indeed.
Abigail's gaze drifted to the dance floor, where executives and their partners moved to the orchestra's music. Sometimes the most logical partnerships face the greatest initial resistance. Whitney understood they weren't just talking about business anymore. Change is frightening until it proves itself beneficial. Precisely! Abigail turned back to her. The board meeting next month, I'm recommending you for the executive committee, the youngest member in company history. I'm honored and ready. I know you are. Abigail stood, smoothing her emerald gown. Continue with Wellington. The conversation seems productive. As the gala wound down, Whitney found herself reflecting on the journey. 2 years ago, she had been Lionel Davis, uncomfortable in his skin, hiding behind accomplishments. Now she stood confidently as Whitney Davis, her professional success matched by personal fulfillment. The acquisition presentation the next morning exceeded expectations. Wellington's team responded enthusiastically to Whitney's strategic vision. The following weeks were a whirlwind of negotiations, due diligence meetings, and integration planning. Through it all, Whitney and Abigail maintained their professional relationship, their shared experience creating an unspoken bond that enhanced their business partnership. They became known in industry circles as the formidable duo reshaping Abernathy Industries for the future. 3 months after the gala, Whitney's appointment to the executive committee was announced. At 42, Abigail was the youngest CEO in the company's history. At 34, Whitney became its youngest executive committee member. The morning of her first board meeting, Whitney stood in her office, reviewing her presentation materials. Her blonde hair was styled in a sleek professional updo. She wore a tailored navy dress with subtle gold accessories that complemented her coloring. A knock at her door revealed Abigail, impeccable in a cream pantsuit, her blonde hair framing her face in soft waves. "Ready for your debut, Whitney?" "As ready as I'll ever be." Abigail entered, closing the door behind her. "I wanted a moment before we're surrounded by board members and financial projections." "Of course. 2 years ago, we were different people, at least to the world." Abigail's voice carried the weight of shared experience.
When I saw you that night at the Golden Crane, my first thought was that my career was over.
"I never would have." Abigail raised a hand. "I know that now. But in that moment, I felt exposed in a way I'd spent decades avoiding." She moved to the window, looking out at the city. "That moment of vulnerability ultimately forced me to confront what I'd been suppressing. In a strange way, I'm grateful for it." Whitney joined her at the window. "It affected me profoundly as well, seeing someone I respected so much embrace their truth. It gave me permission to examine my own. And look at us now." Abigail smiled. "Leading one of the largest corporations in the country, not despite who we are, but because of it. Authentic leadership creates authentic results. The Wellington acquisition proves that." "Indeed, the market responded beyond our projections." Abigail checked her watch. "The board is waiting. They can be a traditional group, but results speak louder than prejudice." Together they walked to the boardroom, 2 women whose journeys had intersected at a pivotal moment. Their heels clicked in synchrony along the marble corridor, a rhythm of progress and transformation. The board meeting began with Abigail's customary precision. She introduced Whitney with professional warmth, emphasizing her achievements rather than her identity. The board members, mostly older men with decades of business experience, received her with respectful attention. Whitney delivered her presentation flawlessly. Her command of the material, coupled with her natural poise, won over even the most skeptical board members. Questions were answered with confidence and clarity. By the meeting's conclusion, the atmosphere had evolved from assessment to collaboration.
"Impressive work, Ms. Davis."
Harold Winters, the longest-serving board member, commented as they adjourned. "Your integration strategy for Wellington is particularly innovative." "Thank you, Mr. Winters. I appreciate your support." As the boardroom emptied, Abigail remained seated, reviewing notes. Whitney gathered her materials, preparing to leave. "Whitney," Abigail called softly. "A moment." Whitney returned to her seat. "Yes?" "You mentioned in your presentation the possibility of expanding into European markets next quarter. The preliminary research indicates favorable conditions, especially with Wellington's existing partnerships in Germany." Abigail nodded. "I'd like you to lead that initiative. It means significant travel, high visibility, and direct board reporting." "I'd be honored." "It also means being the face of Abernathy Industries in more conservative business environments." Abigail's implication was clear. "I understand. I'm ready for that responsibility." "I believe you are." Abigail closed her portfolio. "We're changing more than just this company, Whitney. We're changing perceptions of what leadership looks like." "1 quarterly report at a time," Whitney smiled. Precisely. Abigail stood, smoothing her cream pantsuit. There's a dinner with key investors tonight. Your presence would be valuable. I'll be there. That evening, at an exclusive restaurant overlooking Central Park, Whitney arrived in a sophisticated burgundy cocktail dress, her blonde hair loose around her shoulders. The gathering included major shareholders and financial analysts, all curious about the company's dramatic growth. Abigail orchestrated the evening masterfully, ensuring Whitney was positioned to share insights with influential attendees. The conversation flowed from business projections to broader industry trends, with Whitney's contributions receiving thoughtful engagement. The European expansion is particularly intriguing, remarked Elena Vassilieva, representing one of their largest institutional investors. The regulatory landscape is challenging. We've developed a compliance framework specifically for the EU market, Whitney explained. It addresses the recent privacy directives while maintaining our data-driven approach. As the evening progressed, Whitney realized how completely her transformation had been embraced in professional circles. These investors and analysts saw her as Whitney Davis, senior executive, her gender identity merely one aspect of her complete self. Later, as guests began departing, Abigail joined Whitney at a quiet corner table. "You've made quite an impression," she noted. Vassilieva rarely engages so thoroughly with new executives. The European strategy resonated with her. Her fund has been underweighted in that market. Abigail smiled. Always the strategist. She paused, considering her next words. When I began my transition, I worried that my effectiveness as a leader would be diminished, that people would see only the change, not the capabilities that remained constant. I had the same fear, Whitney admitted. Yet we've both found the opposite to be true. Authenticity has made us better leaders, not despite the challenges, but because of them. The courage to transform oneself transfers remarkably well to transforming organizations. Whitney nodded. There's a certain clarity that comes from aligning your outer and inner selves. It carries over into business decisions. Precisely, Abigail signaled for the check. The Wellington integration team meets tomorrow at 9. I'd like your assessment of the cultural merger progress. I'll have it ready. Outside the restaurant, their drivers waited with respective company cars. Before departing, Abigail paused. 2 years ago at the Golden Crane, I was living a divided life. Richard in the boardroom, Abigail in hidden moments. I never imagined then that an accidental discovery would lead to such complete transformation, not just for me, but for you as well. Some discoveries are meant to happen, Whitney replied softly, even when they seem like accidents. Indeed. Abigail extended her hand. Until tomorrow, Whitney. Good night, Abigail. As her car pulled away, Whitney watched the city lights blur past the window. Her reflection in the glass showed a confident woman in a burgundy dress, blonde hair catching the passing streetlights, a woman wholly present in her identity and her achievements. The journey from Lionel to Whitney, from hiding to authenticity, had been challenging but profoundly rewarding. What had begun as a shocking discovery in a private club had catalyzed twin transformations that ultimately strengthened both the individuals and the company they led. The car turned toward Whitney's apartment, carrying her home at the end of another successful day, a day lived entirely as herself, in a reality she had once only dreamed possible. Thanks for watching, my girlies! Be sure to check out Patreon for more!